All right, part two, we're back. So constituents, we left off with that. That's a fancy term for the people that you represent. Now, if you're a senator, that's going to be the people you represent in the entire state. Two senators. Our two senators in North Carolina right now, we got Tom Tillis and, oh God, the other guy who's retiring because he did something criminal with insider trading. Google it. He's out at the, at the end of this year, so whatever. Anyways, representatives, their constituents are the residents of their district. So let's look at this map again. This is going to be a map of the districts in North Carolina. So each of these little colored areas on the map, they are a district, and there is a representative that has one. So let's move on to see a little bit more about how these district lines get drawn. House of Representatives, because it's based on population, every 10 years we may have to do what's called reapportion. And really what that is where we're going to take some, we redraw the map, and these representatives may now be representing different people, different parts of the map, right? So the census, every 10 years we do a population count of all people in the Constitution residing in the United States. This is documented, undocumented, small babies to old people, okay? All residents in the United States. How many people in your household? This year was a census year. You hopefully filled out your census, because what that census does, when it counts the population, our government decides how we are able to use funds, that's money, how we are able to use money to help those districts. So if there's an undercount of residents in certain areas, then they won't get money. So you want to say, show me the money. We need everybody to fill out that census form. There was a lot of controversy about the census this year. Our Republican administration, for various reasons, did some things that made it very difficult to get a full population count. But fingers crossed, even with COVID, hopefully we did. So every 10 years, and then, but here's why this is important. So what's going to happen is after that census is counted, the House of Representatives, okay, it's going to impact the House by redistributing a state's representation based on population shifts, okay? So we want to make sure that the representatives are representing somewhat equal amounts of people, okay? If it's a rural district, well, then that district is going to be a whole lot bigger because there's less people living in it. If it's a very urban, where there's cities district, then you're going to see that district be a whole lot smaller. Actually, going back to look at that, you're going to know the Raleigh-Durham area is going to be in that district with the light blue, because that's why it's so small. Somebody will fact check me and tell me that's not the district we're in. Glad to know. So we do the census. There's a picture of the census. Ask you all sorts of stuff. How many people in your household, languages you speak, race, all of that. Very important to know the government's not tracking us for this, okay? This is an honest effort that we do, again, to get the money. The last reapportionment was in 2010, so this next reapportionment is going to come. I don't think it's going to start till 2021, but it is going to start based on that data. You can see on this map for congressional seats in 2010, the dark blue, like Texas and Florida, for example, they gained seats. The orange, they lost seats. Now remember, we always have 435 representatives, so these are just shifts, okay? And in some states you see no change based on population. Who draws congressional districts? Well, the state lawmakers, the state legislature, the General Assembly, as we talked about as they're called, they get to draw these districts, and even weirdly more enough, which both political parties will claim this is not fair, whichever political party happens to be in power in the General Assembly in that year when they do this reapportionment gets to draw those maps. So, problem. What if a certain political party holds more power in the state General Assembly? This definitely happened in North Carolina in 2010 when they did reapportionment. The Republicans had a majority, so they got to draw the maps. In a world where both political parties are super fair and they want to win fair, they want to win on their ideas, they don't want to win because they had to rig the game, the districts would be drawn, populations would be roughly equal, and districts would look something like this. This is not the state of North Carolina, but districts would look something like this, okay? And you can tell from that District 5 in the yellow, probably more people live there, it's why it's smaller, right? District 4, less people, it's why it's bigger. But all these representatives represent about the same amount of people of all political parties, right? Well, many, many, many years ago in U.S. history, some politicians got an idea to draw these maps in a way that would give their political party an advantage in elections. I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute that shows, but if you look at this, the old famous political cartoon, Senator Elbridge Gerry, this is named after him forever and always, figured out how to get an unfair advantage for his political party. And they said this district he drew was like a salamander. So gerrymandering is where that comes from. And then you have the more modern political cartoon, redistricting. It's like a puzzle, right? And if you can fit that puzzle together in a way to advantage your party, while not legal, people do it. So here's your definition. And we're going to definitely make this a yellow term because it needs to be in your notes. So we have, anyways, the definition is drawing a congressional district to favor a political party. I don't know why it's not working. There you go. It's going to be on the test. Know it. If a political party is found out to have gerrymandered districts, this is illegal. Districts will have to be redrawn. Can be hard to prove. Story time. North Carolina, there was a couple of districts that were in question. The belief by the Democrats was that the Republicans drew these districts in a way that gave them an unfair advantage. They did it because they basically created a district that was full of people of a lot of African Americans. And, well, when I get to the slide to explain this, you'll see. But basically, they were able to do this based on race. As we know, African Americans tend to vote Democrat. Depending on what part of the country, anywhere from 80 to 90%, they vote Democrat. So what these Republicans figured out is if you drew a district where you sort of broke off, or cracking as they call it, you broke off these African-American neighborhoods and you spread them all out, then you would basically dilute the voting power of these African-Americans that tend to vote Democrat. So that's going to advantage the Republicans, okay? These districts actually were... The districts themselves, or whoever drew them, went to our North Carolina State Supreme Court, and the North Carolina State Supreme Court said that it was shocking how incredibly racial these districts were drawn. The opinion on this was something like they haven't seen anything like this since the days of Jim Crow and segregation, and those districts have to be redrawn. So, yay for justice and something that worked out in the courts. So here's a little explanation of how gerrymandering works. And if you need more, by all means, go to YouTube and say, explain gerrymandering, because there's a lot of great videos out there. It can be a little bit complicated. So this is, if you look at the blue and red, right? So blue's Democrats, red is Republican. You can see from the one on the left that 60% Democrats, 40% red. So if this was a district of 50 people, the Republicans would lose, right? But they're going to figure out a way to take the same number of people and redraw the district in a way that they win. So a super fair district drawn like we would hope, you're going to end up seeing 3 Democrat districts winning and 2 red, which is about equal to the population. So there you go. If you divide it the other way, you see now that the Democrats, this isn't always going to be Republicans that can do this, but you can see the Democrats can draw those lines where, look what they did. All 5 districts become blue. So 5 Democratic districts, 0 red. So this means even though 40% of these 50 people vote Republican, their voting strength basically was diluted, and all of these districts that got divided up, they're going to win. And then you look over at the last one, and this is how, even though there's only 40% of the people voting Republican, they draw those districts in a way that the red is going to win. So now they end up with 3 red districts and 2 blue districts. Basically, hopefully what you can see from this is, in a perfect world where we have 1 vote, your vote counts as much as mine, you would see a district, or really you could see 5 districts if that's what they're breaking into, being divided like number 1, the perfect representation there, is you would see 3 blue districts and 2 red. That's about the same equality as the percentage of people that live in that region. But number 2 and number 3 on your list, those are basically unfair ways to draw that district. So that is gerrymandering. How do you tell? Well, if you look on a map in an actual district in the House of Representatives and it looks something like this, people start to get really suspicious. Why is that district going all across the state of North Carolina? This was actually one that went to court. Why is it going all caterwalk when districts should be drawn here like number 1, right? Okay. Committees, we're going to go through quickly to this. Forget your gerrymandering. Back to Congress, we have committees. So anytime there's a piece of legislation, this legislation, based on what it is, if it's funding for education, if it's something about climate change, it's going to get routed out to both a House and a Senate, two different committees, and what can be known as a standing committee based on that. If you can zoom in on that little infographic, you'll see all the various committees that we have. There's one called the Appropriations Committee. That's the one that deals with money. How do we pay for stuff, right? So that one's pretty important. So anyways, just know this. When we get to how a bill becomes a law, you'll get more in the nitty-gritty of these committees, who runs them, how the bill goes from one committee to the next. But in the big sense is somebody didn't just write a piece of legislation and say, hey, let's put it out on the floor and vote, right? There's a whole process. As the old expression goes, there's two things you want to never see being made, and that's sausage and legislation, because it is complicated and icky. For another day. Now here's an interesting thing to think about, and we should talk about this more on another day. Is Congress truly representative of the people? A lot of people say no. Now this infographic is from the 114th Congress, which is a few years back, or a few sessions back. But you can see broken down by gender. Male is about 80%. Female is about 20%. Well, in the United States of America, male and female is about half, right? So is Congress truly representative of the people? Well, if you're a woman, you're going to say no, because if there's 50% of us in the country, why is only 20% female? And then we've got the race here. So again, white, you see 82%. There are not 82% of this country is not white people, okay? You can see the breakdown there, Asian and Hispanic. If you're black, Hispanic, or Asian, you're probably looking at Congress and saying, this is not representative of me and my group of people, my demographics. Do you believe that for someone to represent you, they have to be your same race or your same gender? You may not believe that. I can tell you, I think Bernie Sanders, old, rich, white guy, represents me really well, right? We don't have anything in common. But in general, people do believe, look, if we have issues in the black community, we need some African-American representatives in Congress, right? The last one there is religion. So we see most of our representatives, we got like 90% Christian, the breakdown there of other religions. This is also not really representative of the general population. So this is always a good sort of little short essay or debate question is Congress truly representative of the people? A lot of people are going to say no. Some people may say it doesn't matter, you know. A white male that's Christian can still represent me, even though I may be none of those things. And that's a fair opinion too. What are the legislative powers of Congress? This is in your textbook, these little infographics. You know, we've touched on these in the articles. Legislative, declare war, obviously make laws. They deal with things like commerce. All of this, you may want to zoom in, look in the actual other PowerPoint that you can and see this. But we're keeping it real simple here in Pandemic 2020. So, you know, if you know they make laws and you know they have a handful of these powers, we're good. But what are some non-legislative roles of Congress? These are important, and again, this is kind of oversimplifying, but you need to know them, all the ones in yellow. The power, Congress can impeach presidents and other public officials. Some judges, they can do that as well. In Congress, the power to impeach itself, which is the accusation of some sort of crime or something that goes against our Constitution, that starts in the House. This happened in 2019 to President Trump. And if you watched any of those hours and hours of what looked like a trial, that was the House, and they were running impeachments. They voted to impeach him based on some shenanigans that he did. And then it went to the Senate. Now, the Senate runs the trial, and they look at that evidence and they say guilty or not guilty, just like the court. Well, the Senate, by a very narrow margin, voted to acquit him and basically say he was not guilty. Same thing happened to the Democrat Bill Clinton in the 1990s. Providing oversight is huge. There's a black and white photo there. Remember the McCarthy trials you studied in history? Both houses of Congress can provide oversight to either people in the government where they think something's wrong, like we did to Postmaster General a couple of weeks ago, or oversight for something else that may be outside of the government. One time they did something about steroids in baseball. The House did that. And then the third one is the power to approve or reject presidential nominees. There is a huge one right now. SCOTUS judge, Supreme Court Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Maybe Trump is going to squeeze in a nomination before the election. People are saying he should not have that power right now, but it's happening. So judges and other officials in the government have to be approved by the Senate. That's your check and balance. Bye-bye.